My wife cheated and took everything in the divorce, so I took everything from her. The betrayal. Sitting in that courtroom, I watched my wife smile as the judge gave her everything. The house. Hers. The majority of my savings. Hers. The company I spent years building. Hers. And me? I was left with almost nothing. My lawyer had warned me that this could happen, that family courts almost always favor the wife. But I had been naive. I had believed in fairness, in justice, in the idea that the truth would matter. It didn't. She played her part perfectly, sitting there in her designer dress, wiping fake tears as she talked about how I was never there for her, how she felt so alone in our marriage, how she had no choice but to move on. Meanwhile, I knew the truth. She had been cheating for over a year. And worse, she had planned this entire divorce before I even found out. I clenched my fists under the table, trying to keep my face neutral. The judge was still speaking, but I barely heard him. My eyes were on her, on the woman I once loved, the woman I built a life with, and I felt nothing but pure, cold hatred. I had lost everything. But as I walked out of that courtroom, one thought burned in my mind. She thinks she won. She has no idea what's coming. The day everything fell apart. 6 months ago, I had no idea my life was about to be destroyed. I was successful. I owned a small but thriving business. I had a beautiful home, and I thought I had a wife who loved me. Sure, things weren't perfect. I worked long hours, and maybe I wasn't as present as I should have been. But I was doing it all for us. Or at least, that's what I thought. Then, one night, I came home early. I had wrapped up a client meeting ahead of schedule and decided to surprise Lisa with dinner. I even picked up her favorite wine, thinking it would be a nice night for the two of us. But when I stepped into our bedroom, I found her wrapped around another man. My breath caught in my throat. The shock was so strong that, for a moment, I thought I was dreaming, that this wasn't real. Lisa gasped when she saw me, scrambling to cover herself. The guy, some gym trainer-looking douchebag, just smirked. "Shit," she muttered, pulling the sheets up. "I thought you were out of town." That was it. No apology. No shame, just annoyance that I had caught her. I stood there, still processing, when the guy had the audacity to chuckle. "Well, this is awkward," he said. I saw red, but before I could say a word, Lisa sighed and looked at me like I was the problem. "Look, we need to talk," she said, brushing her hair back like this was a casual conversation. This isn't working, okay? I was going to tell you soon anyway." "Tell me what?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. She rolled her eyes. Rolled her fucking eyes. "That I'm filing for divorce." My heart stopped. "Oh," she added, "and I already spoke to a lawyer. Just so you know, I'm taking the house. And since I helped support you while you built your business, I'll be getting a share of that too." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was a setup. She had planned this. Planned to cheat. Planned to leave. And planned to take everything. And judging by the smug look on her lover's face, he knew too. I turned and walked out before I did something I'd regret. But as I left, one thought kept repeating in my mind. She's going to regret this. I'll make sure of it. The fall. Losing everything doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize you have nothing left. The divorce was just the beginning. After the court ruled in Lisa's favor, I was forced to move out of my own house. The house I had paid for. The house I had built my life in. Lisa, of course, moved her new boyfriend in immediately. I heard about it from a mutual friend. Man, I hate to tell you this, but she's already redecorating the place. Acting like you never even lived there. I wasn't surprised, but hearing it still felt like a knife to the gut. The worst part? It wasn't just the house. Lisa had taken a massive cut of my business. On paper, she had convinced the court that she supported me while I built it, even though all she ever did was spend my money. With her sudden ownership stake, she forced me to buy her out, at a price so high, I had to drain my savings just to keep the company. By the time it was all over, I had heavy checkmark no house, heavy checkmark no savings, heavy checkmark a struggling business barely hanging on. Meanwhile, Lisa and her new lover were living my life. It should have broken me, but instead, it made me dangerous. Because while Lisa was busy spending my money, I was planning something far worse. I wasn't just going to recover. I was going to bury her. Starting from nothing, I moved into a shitty one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The kind of place where the walls were thin, the floorboards creaked, and the neighbors screamed at each other at 2 a.m. But I didn't care. I was focused on one thing only: rebuilding. The first few months were hell. With my business struggling under the financial strain of Lisa's buyout, I had to take on extra work just to stay afloat. Heavy checkmark worked insane hours. Heavy checkmark cut off all distractions. Heavy checkmark became obsessed with growth. Slowly but surely, I started getting back on my feet. While Lisa was living comfortably, thinking I was done for, I was setting the foundation for something far bigger than she could ever imagine. Because here's the thing about people like Lisa. They never plan for the long game. They think they've won because they got the quick payout. They get comfortable, careless, and that was going to be her downfall. The first signs of her mistakes. 6 months after the divorce, I started hearing rumors. Lisa had quit her job, assuming she could just live off my money forever. She was spending recklessly, lavish vacations, expensive jewelry, treating herself like a queen. Meanwhile, her new boyfriend? He wasn't the type to settle down. Bro, I saw him at a club last weekend. Jason, my old friend, told me one night. Dude was all over some other girl. Lisa wasn't with him. I smirked. Of course he was. Lisa thought she was untouchable, that she had secured the perfect life. But what she didn't realize, I was still watching. And soon, I was going to strike. The comeback. Lisa thought she had won. She was living in my house, spending my money, and flaunting her new relationship like she had upgraded her life. Meanwhile, I was stuck in a tiny apartment, working myself to exhaustion just to recover from the financial hit she had inflicted on me. But what she didn't realize, I was getting stronger. While she was busy wasting money on luxury vacations and designer clothes, I was rebuilding. I took on new business partners, expanded my company, and started making smart investments. I didn't just want to recover. I wanted to surpass everything I had before. And most of all, I wanted revenge. Laying the trap. It took nearly 2 years. 2 years of relentless work, sacrifice, and planning. But by the end of it, I wasn't just back on my feet. I was more successful than I had ever been. Heavy checkmark, my business was booming. Heavy checkmark, my bank account was overflowing. Heavy checkmark, I had built powerful connections. But the best part? Lisa had no idea. As far as she knew, I was still struggling. She never bothered to check. She was too busy living in denial, thinking her money would last forever. And that's exactly what I wanted her to believe. Because the moment she realized the truth, it would already be too late. Her world starts falling apart. I didn't have to destroy Lisa myself. She was already doing a damn good job of it on her own. Heavy checkmark, she had burned through most of the money she took from me. Heavy checkmark, her boyfriend had started disappearing for work trips, but I knew he was cheating. Heavy checkmark, she tried to get back into the workforce, but after 2 years of doing nothing, no one wanted to hire her. The life she thought would last forever, it was crumbling. And just when she thought things couldn't get worse, I made my move. The final blow. Lisa had no idea how bad things were about to get. She was already on the edge. Her savings were running dry, her boyfriend was barely around, and her attempts to find a job were failing miserably. She had built her entire post-divorce life on the assumption that my money would last forever. But now, that safety net was gone. And the best part? I was the one who would pull the rug out from under her, taking the one thing she had left. Lisa still had one valuable asset. The house. My house. The home I had paid for. The home she stole from me in the divorce. The home she was now struggling to afford. She had already refinanced it twice, trying to cover her mounting expenses. But with no job, no income, and her perfect life falling apart, she was barely keeping up with the payments. So I made a few calls. And then, just like that, the bank put it up for auction. Lisa was losing her home. And the best part? She had no idea who was buying it. The day she realized the truth. 2 weeks later, I arranged a meeting with the real estate agent. I requested a walkthrough of the house, my house, before finalizing the sale. Lisa, of course, had no idea who the new owner was yet. She assumed it was just another buyer, a stranger. She was wrong. When I arrived, she was already there, waiting with the agent. She looked awful. The stress had taken its toll. Her once perfect makeup was barely there. Her expensive clothes looked thrown together, and her usual arrogant smirk was gone. For the first time in years, Lisa didn't look untouchable. She looked desperate. Then, her eyes landed on me, and she froze. Her face paled. Her mouth opened slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. "Oh," I said, stepping forward. "Didn't they tell you? I'm the buyer." Her jaw clenched. You're lying. I pulled out the contract. Signed. Sealed. Done. Nope, I said, handing it to her. It's all right here. I own this house now. She grabbed the papers, her hands trembling as she scanned the documents. It was real. I watched as realization dawned in her eyes. She had lost. Everything she took from me gone. And now, I was the one deciding her fate. The final decision. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. What are you going to do? I tilted my head, pretending to think. Well, I could let you stay. I paused, watching a flicker of hope flash across her face. But you'd have to pay rent. To me. Every month. She swallowed hard, her pride warring with reality. Or, I continued, smirking, you pack your things and get out. Right now. Tears welled in her eyes. Please. I stared at her. For years, this woman had humiliated me, betrayed me, and left me with nothing. And now? Now, she was the one with nothing. I leaned in slightly. You wanted me to fail? I said softly. Instead, I took back everything you stole. Now get out of my house. She let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping in defeat. She knew there was no mercy coming. Without another word, Lisa turned and walked away. And just like that, she was gone. The aftermath. Lisa walked out of my house with nothing but a few suitcases and a look of complete defeat. I watched from the window as she stood outside, frantically calling someone, probably her ex-lover, hoping he would come to her rescue. But I already knew the truth. He had moved on. The second Lisa's money dried up, so did his love. Now, she was truly alone. And me? I had never been better. Where she ended up. Over the next few months, I heard bits and pieces of Lisa's downfall. Heavy check marks. She tried to find a job, but after years of doing nothing, no one wanted to hire her. Heavy check marks. She bounced between cheap motels and the couches of distant friends. Heavy check mark. Eventually, even those friends got tired of her, and she ended up in a tiny apartment, barely scraping by. The woman who once laughed as she took everything from me, now, she had nothing. Where I am now, taking my house back was just the final piece of the puzzle. I had already won long before that. I had rebuilt my business, made smart investments, and expanded beyond what I ever thought possible. I wasn't just successful again, I was richer than I had ever been. Lisa's betrayal used to haunt me, but now, she wasn't even a thought in my mind. One day, I was walking downtown when I spotted her across the street. She was sitting outside a rundown cafe, staring blankly at her phone, looking nothing like the woman I used to know. She saw me too. For a moment, I saw hope flash across her face, like she thought I might stop, like I might feel sorry for her. I didn't. I simply smiled, gave her a nod, and kept walking. Because the truth was, I had already moved on. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Final thought. She thought she had ruined me. Instead, she only made me stronger. And now, she was nothing but a memory. The aftermath. When I closed that door, it wasn't just the end of a conversation. It was the end of her power over me. For years, Lisa had dictated the terms of my life. She had taken what she wanted, left me with nothing, and laughed while I struggled to rebuild. But now, the cycle was over. She had nothing left to take. No house, no money, no backup plan, and I didn't feel sorry for her. She had made her choices. She had believed she was untouchable, that she could cheat, steal, and destroy everything we had built together without consequence. But karma doesn't forget, and now she was paying the price. Her life after losing everything. Lisa tried to fight it at first. She refused to believe she had lost. She reached out to old friends, hoping someone would offer her a place to stay. But she had burned too many bridges. Heavy checkmark. Her social circle had moved on. They had been there for her when she was rich, when she was throwing parties and living the high life. But now, she was just another person with problems. Heavy checkmark. She tried to get a job, but after years of doing nothing, no one wanted to hire her. She had no real skills, no work ethic, just an inflated sense of self-worth that meant nothing anymore. Heavy checkmark. She reached out to her ex-boyfriend, the one she had left me for. But, of course, he was gone. The last I heard, she was renting a tiny apartment in a bad part of town, barely scraping by. No house, no fancy vacations, no designer clothes, just her and the consequences of her own actions. She had gone from stealing my life to barely surviving her own. And I had never been better. Moving forward, without her, taking back my house was just the final piece of the puzzle. By then, I had already won. I had rebuilt my business into something even stronger than before. My bank account was overflowing. I had new friends, new opportunities, and a life that Lisa was no longer part of. For a long time, I thought revenge would be the thing that made me happy. But the truth? The real victory wasn't about ruining Lisa. It was about leaving her behind. She spent years trying to destroy me. And yet, here I was, thriving. And she was nothing. One last encounter. A few months later, I was downtown when I saw her again. Lisa was sitting outside a rundown cafe, her once perfect hair tied back in a messy ponytail, her designer clothes replaced with something plain and forgettable. She looked ordinary, not the untouchable woman who had once walked out of a courtroom with my life in her hands. Just a person who had lost everything. She saw me too. For a moment, she looked like she might say something, like she wanted to talk, to reach out, to ask for something. Instead, I just smiled, gave her a nod, and kept walking. Because the truth was, she didn't matter anymore. And that was the greatest revenge of all.